Hey everyone, and welcome to Doc Lab's latest event. This event's going to be a really interesting one, actually. It's a little bit different from stuff that we've done before. First of all, my name's Nick Lambert. I'm the CEO of Doc Labs. And tonight's topic is why Amazon is doubling down on digital credentials, mDLs, and EUDI. On this episode, we are delighted to be joined by Paul Grassi. Paul is Amazon's principal product manager for identity services. And I should point out at this point, Paul is working for Amazon, the e-commerce business, not AWS, because I think that's maybe something that you see quite a lot, Paul. But thanks for joining us, Paul. How are you today?
Good, thank you. And you're right. Sometimes we get our wires crossed and talk about AWS when we should be talking about Amazon.
Yeah, absolutely. So the kind of backdrop for tonight is that in an industry that's probably as nascent as ours, many people have been working in the space are kind of wondering, are we there yet constantly? Like just the market's not maybe moved quite as quick as we would have liked. But we're certainly seeing that that's starting to recover a lot now. But as a result of that, we're often looking for adoption and success stories that we can kind of hold on to and really see that the world is going to see what we see, which is the huge potential of decentralized identity. And when someone on the scale of Amazon says that they're doubling down on this technology, we'd be crazy not to try and dig into that a little bit, hence Paul being on this show tonight. So this session itself will last for around about an hour, but take us up to on the hour, so probably about 55 minutes or so. And will be largely a Q&A between Paul and myself. And then that will be followed by kind of audience Q&A. So audience are asking questions during the course of the episode. And so if you do have a question, please add it into Riverside, which is the web app you're watching on. So just put it into the comments there and we'll pick that up and route it to Paul. We normally get through most of the questions. So please ask away if there's something that you're interested in. And also, if you could let us know in the audience where you're listening and watching from, that would be fantastic. So I've blubbered on enough, and I'm keen to get started. So Paul, thanks again for joining us. Keen to get kicked off. To start that process, maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit, maybe how you found yourself at Amazon and maybe what got you interested in the field of identity.
Sure. So, and thanks for having me. I've been doing identity longer than I'd like to admit, since the early 2000s when it was more of a enterprise compliance play as opposed to, looking at citizen and consumer identity. But glad to still be in this space and glad to see the progress we've made on both the authentication and the digital identity side. It's been great progress in recent years, and we're excited about what we're seeing in the market. As you mentioned, I'm a product manager inside of Identity Services, looking after our retail site as well as any third-party subsidiary that Amazon has acquired over time, including sellers and vendors and other entities that are using Amazon for their business needs. We are. I'm right now. I'm spending most of my time in the identity verification space. There's a team of folks that are building a product that helps us verify either attributes or whole identity about people, depending on the use case. Which is why we're here today and why we're talking about our play in the digital identity, digital credential space.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think like we first became aware of you discussing this. I think there was maybe an article somewhere of I think it was publicizing a panel that you'd done. And I think the part of the statement, I think from your either from that panel or from the article itself, which is the phrase that really we latched onto, which is doubling down on digital credentials. Maybe you can share a little bit why you see that as a strategic focus for the organization.
Sure. So, kind of the not to be too what's the word? Kind of using anecdotes or colloquialisms, but we are in the business right now of verifying, and we want to be in the business of accepting digital identity. We do not want to have to verify on our own. We will. We know that that's an important capability to offer customers that may not be carrying a digital credential, but we want to be in the acceptance world rather than the verification space. We see, for those of you that are following Amazon, I won't spend a lot of time talking about passkeys, but you've seen our kind of doubling down on the passkey side. On the identity side, we see digital credentials as the kind of equivalent in the market, as really the mover that we need to be following in order to give our customers a great experience, manage their security and privacy expectations, and to go to market quicker with products and services that we have that require some form of verification.
Got it. And just for clarification, Paul, where are you seeing the difference? Could you maybe explain the difference between acceptance and verification as you see it?
So, sure. On the verification side, we have multiple verification capabilities. We have demographic checks, credit bureau checks, the older school traditional kind of verification that works well, but doesn't meet every use case that we have. So we've evolved into, accepting ID do an ID upload. We're globally deployed there. So it's not just driver's license. It's any real global ID that somebody may have, but it's, the physical document upload, selfie check that we're all familiar with. And then we'll verify the authenticity of that document. We'll verify that it matches the person that's presenting it. And we'll evaluate the information that we are required to evaluate based on the use case that the user is actually working within. And all of that is verification on our end, making sure that individual is who they claim to be. I would say it's still unfamiliar to users, even though in our space, we call it kind of the traditional method. It's a lengthy process. It's error prone. And in some cases, while we take privacy extremely seriously and we don't really store any of the information that we'll collect from a driver's license, we kind of use it in the moment and then throw it away. It still is a little leaky from a privacy perspective. If you need to know if somebody's older than 18, why do you need their ID number and their home address, for example, or even their full date of birth? And then there's probably 11, 12 screens that a user needs to go through. And if they start from their desktop and their desktop doesn't have the capabilities that we need to do this work, we've got cross-device flows that allows them to move to their mobile, but it's not the best customer experience that is out there.
Yes, it's kind of a win-win moving to acceptance, because you get to the point where not only are your processes and back-end systems much less complex, but also the CX the customer goes through is much simpler, and as a consequence of that, I'd imagine that the onboarding rates are much higher.
Agreed. And I also think there's a degree of control that the user has there that they may not necessarily have when they're uploading their entire, ID document.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that's interesting and part of the title as well is something that happened that took some of us by surprise last year was I guess the rollout of mDLs, particularly in America, in the USA, and it just all of a sudden seemed that there was this huge momentum behind it, and companies that we partner with were asking us, like, when can you kind of start to verify these kind of mDocs and these mDLs? And so it really seemed to has a strong market pull behind it, I think, where some of the other technology that we're building, maybe we're trying to push into the market at points. But what's your own perception about the rate of adoption of mDLs across North America just now, Paul?
So we're obviously super excited about mDLs, and in 2025, we'll be implementing the ability to pull or query mobile wallets to pull information about a customer from their mobile wallet or from their mobile driver's license, and in some cases potentially a passport as well. I think that what the states are doing is outstanding. I mean, they're moving as quickly as states can move. I think what AMVA is doing with their trust service and their implementation guidelines is great. Obviously, when I said we were doubling down, part of the background of that statement is we don't want to be in this chicken or egg conundrum that we always seem to find ourselves in the identity space, which is, I've got an identity, but I don't have a relying party. Well, I'm a relying party, but I'm not going to use your identity because you don't have enough. We're not going to get into that mix. We see the incredible benefit that technologies like mDL will have, and are going to start accepting them regardless of what adoption looks like, hoping that we can be a force multiplier in the market to get consumers to actually bootstrap their phones, their mobile devices, with these digital identity credentials. I'd say I can't really say what our first use case is going to be, but over time we will be adopting the use of mDLs for a range of use cases that we have, and hopefully will be that set of killer use cases that help the states onboard users to mDLs. So, long story short, I'm not sure. Last I was told there was about 5 million mDLs out there. That's obviously not enough to move the needle at the scale that Amazon is at. But we hope to help move the needle on the adoption side.
Yeah. And it certainly would. Amazon's pretty ubiquitous in the US, the UK, where I'm based as well. I don't think there's a day an Amazon delivery doesn't come to our house, unfortunately. So I say unfortunately, I mean for my bank balance, but
yeah, same.
It's everywhere. So I could see how that would be a killer use case if you get, something that's that frequently used, that, you can use an MDL for that purpose. I think it would be great. I think there's also challenges though, isn't there? Because even as we look at the MDL landscape right now in the USA, it's, of course you have states there as opposed to what we're probably used to in Europe, which is a lot more centralized. So for us at least, it seems quite fragmented, and each of the states are progressing at obviously different paces, and they're taking quite different approaches. So some are using the MDoc standard, some are not. Some are maybe really focused on their own state app. Others are maybe looking to some of the big players, other big tech players in the space, Google, Apple, maybe Samsung, to actually pick up the baton and run with it. And so maybe there are some of the challenges that we see here as well. Are you seeing those as well on your side, Paul? And are there any others that you think that we'll need to work through as MDLs get more widely adopted?
We've decided to take a multi-pronged approach, I think, at the onset. This ecosystem is obviously new. It's developing. It's evolving. So while I would love to say, we're taking one approach and that one approach works across the board, it's just not possible to say that right now. So we are taking an approach where we are working with various providers in the market, whether it be Apple or Google, or using standards-based approaches to get access to these MDocs. And we're being very particular about, what APIs we choose to use. Like I said, we would prefer to be standards-based across the board. We want to avoid bespoke implementations. So we're being a little bit picky, but I'd say right now we are more interested in onboarding as many MDLs as we can, and less interested in maybe doing it one way and only one way. That said, I have a North Star vision in my head where we are in a standards-based mode where the only thing that we need to do is, you know, um, download a public key for a new region, and poof, that license or that passport or that document is now available, rather than having to do any type of integration on our end. But right now, we're okay with the work it's going to take to get to some of these individual states that may be doing their own thing. But again, in 2025, which is when we plan to go live, we don't have anything live right now, and I'll say planned because I don't want to make promises I can't keep. We're taking the Google, Apple, and ISO based approach.
Yeah, and it's a good product manager that puts the timeline caveats in there, Paul. You've obviously been doing that job a long time, but no, that all makes perfect sense. Yeah, I think we're taking a similar approach ourselves, like a doc trying to help our customers be able to accept and verify these types of credentials. There's so many different options to go down, and many bets you could place. But I think if you're really keen to jump in feet first, I think trying to do many things is probably the best way to try and ensure you get the right level of adoption. Moving now into EUDI, the European Digital Identity side, which is something that is obviously also picking up a lot of steam.
Yep.
Obviously, having nation states needing to provide identity wallets to their citizens by September 2026. So it's not here right now, but it's certainly looming large on the horizon. What can you maybe walk us through what Amazon envisions digital credentials being integrated into its services from an EUDI perspective, and maybe even elaborating into what would you imagine with your product manager hat on? What would that customer journey look like, Paul?
Yeah, and we're wrestling with that right now. The good news is, or depending on your perspective, maybe the bad news, this is regulatorily driven. So there are dates that we have to meet. So there isn't a question of if, it's a question of when. But I think one of the things that I like about what's going on in the EU is, even if this wasn't regulatory driven, we see the EUDI wallet as a great thing for EU citizens and for our services. So just like in the US, where mDLs right now are in various stages of implementation, there are regulations driving what states do. There's no regulation driving that we have to accept them, yet we are, for the customer purposes or benefits that we've talked about already, and for our benefits. So same thing goes with what's going on in the EU. I think we would be gearing up to accept these things regardless of the regulation. But the regulation is out there, and it's helping us shape our timelines and get our ducks in a row. Customer journey, we're still working on that. Certainly there are interesting flows that we can offer that we don't offer today. One click sign up that gets you, bootstraps the account with all the information it needs, plus the payment information, plus the shipping information, plus a pass key, would be super interesting. But at the onset, again, we're taking a very pragmatic and deliberate approach to the EUDI wallet, in the sense that, I'm not sure about you, but I've been a customer of Amazon for over 20 years. I've never encountered a flow where I need to prove something about myself. So I don't think with the wallets will be all of a sudden a part of everyone's experience, because we just don't need that information for everyone's experience. But for those that we do need verified attributes about, or we do need verified identity about, that wallet will be part and parcel to that experience. And then there's some other interesting use cases. I mean, depending on your perspective, right now, the only information we verify when you're a new customer is obviously payment instrument and address. It would be, right now, address is verified in the sense, is it a valid address? we don't say, is it a valid address for Paul? We say, is it a valid address? The ability to pull something like address from the wallet and know it's legitimate, it's verified, and it's mine would be helpful in a lot of situations.
And I guess as well, Paul, it'd come down to, I mean, you're right. I don't think I've been a customer for a long time as well. And I'm the same as you. I don't recall having to provide, an actual identity for something, an actual identity document. But I guess, does that come down to the type of product maybe and the level of assurance that's required? Are there products on Amazon where I would need to provide more than just a proof of address and the ability to pay for that item?
Certainly. So I'd say first and foremost, privacy and pseudonymity or anonymity is super important to us, and retaining that when we can and we should is super important. And the EU regulation is obviously very supportive of that. So I don't see us breaking our privacy tenets and our, I think the value of being pseudonymous anytime in the near future, because these wallets are available. But yes, we are offering new products and services on a regular basis where some portion of identity is required, whether it's age-restricted products or healthcare services, which is not in the EU yet, but maybe I can't speak for when and if, but just to give you an idea of the art of the possible, healthcare is certainly an area where these wallets will be helpful, and then even use cases like self-service account recovery. You lose control of a phone number for whatever reason, and you need to get access back into your account. A mechanism, not the only, would be these wallets.
Yeah, fantastic. Do you think as well, like zooming out a little bit more, just thinking about identity more broadly, not necessarily just as to how it relates to Amazon, Paul, but do you think the European Digital Identity Wallet is going to, what impact do you think it will have on digital identity adoption globally? Do you think it's going to have a significant impact there? Do you think it's going to be moving the needle?
I don't know. I hope so. I think, we're starting to see a lot of these wallets crop up. India has a huge presence, a huge capability with the wallet that they offer. We're starting to see, markets that we're entering now, Australia, New Zealand, have digital identity capabilities. I think it will move the needle, but I've been wrong before on this. I hope not to be wrong again, but I think it is a needle mover, and just like 10 years ago, nobody was asking for multi-factor authentication, but now they demand it. I think we'll start seeing that consumer awareness crop up, and why are you asking me to upload a license when I have this wallet on my phone that has all sorts of information about myself?
Yeah, I'd agree, and it takes a good man to admit he's wrong as well. So that's never a bad thing. I'd also think as well, I'd be hopeful for Europe to be regulating this market, as it tends to be good at doing. I'd be optimistic that other regions follow suit, and not necessarily that they, as a carbon copy, but they take the impetus that this stuff works better when it's regulated, because all the actors know what their role is, or have a better idea at least. So maybe there's some cause for optimism that having an EUDI wallet will not only drive it forward in Europe, but will also maybe drive it forward in other places as well. So I would definitely share your optimism there, Paul.
Yeah. I mean, this might be a controversial statement, but the one thing I like about what's going on in the U.S. is it's not necessarily regulated, and it's not the bloated trust framework per se. Now, that requires some lifting on our end to make sure that we, trust the wallet, we trust the license, we trust the state that's issuing it. But it's not a bloated trust framework that, has a ton of rules for all the participants to comply. There's not a cost associated with it, so tapping into these licenses is free of fees and other
Yeah.
types of expenses. So it's not to say I'm against a regulated approach as well, but I've been part of these trust frameworks for a long, long, long time, and they seem to crash under their own weight for, too often to. I'd love an alternative, and I like what we're doing with the mDL in the US.
Yeah. I'm reminded of that phrase, the US innovates and the EU regulates, a little bit. It was going around in my head when you were talking there as well, Paul. But I think that, it's going to be interesting to see how that, I can definitely see both sides of that as well. And I know that some of the bureaucracy that's required to get through some of these frameworks is pretty arduous as well. And it may well indeed hold many companies within the EU back from actually, well, they're definitely, some are not going to meet these deadlines because of the level of effort, bureaucracy and cost as a consequence that's involved. So I think there's definitely some truth in what you're saying there.
Yeah, the good news on our side is that we're already, with what we're doing in the US in 25, we're already positioned for what we need to do for the EU in 26. It's and the way we've built our product in the verification space is one where this should really just plug directly into that and not create a lot of at least technical overhead. Devil's in the details. We'll see. But we're at the onset excited about the work that we're doing in 25 to prepare us for the EU in 26.
Yeah, very good. When it comes looking at a more product angle, then when it comes to these kind of wallets, obviously you can get many different flavors. The more common ones you'd imagine are kind of mobile apps that reside probably on individuals' devices, mostly mobile devices. Also cloud wallets as well, where credentials can be stored in a cloud where the user has the keys, the keys in some form and can access it. What do you see winning? There's trade-offs with each of those approaches, but do you see a front runner now, or do you see? What do you think is going to happen there, Paul?
I think the device-based is the front runner and will be the winner. If you look at what's happening with authentication, the device, authentication is moving out of the cloud and to the device. Now, there's sync fabrics that make using those credentials cross-device easier, but it's still the device is where it's at. And I think the same is going to happen with digital identity. And anecdotally, I'm not sure customer control and consent necessarily is going to win the day, but companies want this information out of their systems and somewhere else, yet still be able to have it available, when necessary, in order to process transactions.
Yep.
and to make sure it's working on attributes that are actually legitimate. It's one thing to sign an attribute; it's another to say it's actually verified and true. So I think, long story short, I think the mobile device-based will win, but we aren't taking a position on one versus the other. If a member state in the EU wants to be cloud-based, then so be it.
Yeah, I think the compliance right now is it's app-based, but it'll be interesting to see how that one pans out. We've spoken to partners in the past. It tends to have been based upon, the preference tends to be driven by their customer. So in many cases, younger audiences, I'm going to say I'm young or something like that. I'm putting myself in that category anyway, but people that are used to using, apps are fine. But I also wonder if it also depends on who your audience is. And some of the banks and things that we've spoken to in the past, they've often favored kind of cloud-based, wallets because, a lot of maybe people that are older are more comfortable using, desktops, laptops, and want everything in the browser in front of them. So maybe the answer is going to depend upon your user base and the demographics of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And which is also why, we're not going to be able to tear down document upload and selfie overnight. People may just, and this is part of the challenges. I'm not sure how many people even know that they can put a driver's license on their phone right now.
Yeah.
And, we've got the travel use case, which is, you would think is a home run, but I've seen varying degrees of support for the mDL even at airports. So, yeah, we will be continuing to roll with the doc upload in parallel with digital identity for some time because of those cases where individuals just don't have the mobile credential or even the cloud credential.
Yeah. Quick segue as well, just on do you guys take a stance on biometrics as well? So of course, as we talk about wallets, and you can obviously, sending something from a wallet, a credential, it proves that you have access to the wallet and nothing else. It doesn't say who you are, and you could have, someone's fallen down drunk and they've left their phone unlocked and you've picked it up and been able to start pretending that you're them. Obviously, for higher assurance use cases, you can start to do things with biometrics and actually have biometrics bound within credentials. So you can prove multiple things at once. Not only are you the controller of the wallet, but you're actually giving a biometric that matches a template somewhere that proves that I'm Nick Lambert, for example. Is that something that's also in your roadmap or something that you're talking about just now, Paul?
I think it's a good question. The way I'm thinking about it from a digital identity perspective is kind of the same way we're looking at it from the passkey side, which is the device is in kind of control of the biometrics and when they're asked for when the customer would be prompted for their biometric and where that biometric is stored. And obviously we prefer locally rather than centrally. I don't see us anytime soon, if ever, and not to get confused with other services that Amazon has where biometrics are front and center, but I don't see us, collecting biometrics and processing them in any way, shape, or form, outside of doing the selfie match for the document upload and then deferring to the device to unlock and authorize these attributes to be shared with us.
Fair enough. Absolutely. Okay, so we're making good progress, almost into audience questions now. Just a couple more from me, and then we'll kind of unleash the audience on you, Paul.
Yeah, sure.
In terms of like trends, then kind of zooming back out all the way out, possibly. Apart from mDLs and EUDI, are there any other significant identity-related trends that you're seeing kind of shape the industry that you're involved with? We talked a little bit about biometrics. There's an acronym I'm thinking of right now that probably is going to feature in your answer, but what other trends are you seeing within ID?
Oh, I want to know what the acronym is now because I don't have one in my head.
It's 2 letters. It's AI.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes. So AI is the hammer and everything is a nail right now. From an AI perspective, it's good for risk management and risk scoring, but it's still too new and still too probabilistic, I think, to solely take over the digital identity and verification space. Not to say it can't or it won't, but that's certainly, you're right. That's obviously the trend to be looking for the most. I don't know what else. I used to say, I've been doing this since 2000 and we still haven't solved the problem. We should all just fire ourselves and hire, start up with a new batch of folks. But, with passkeys on the authentication side and wallets on the identity side, I feel like we're getting close to solving this identity problem. Now, there's still a lot of problems that need to be solved. The underserved and unbanked and undocumented. But when it comes to, identity itself, I feel like we've got the two bookends in place now. And now it's just about adoption and acceptance.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, final question from me. How do you think these new forms of digital identification, we've talked about a lot of them today, How do you think they'll impact the whole industry overall? So obviously we've talked specifically how you see them impacting Amazon. Thinking about other kind of factors of our lives, Paul, where else would you see these having a positive impact?
I think there's no end to where there's positive impact. We talked about health, having the ability to have health credentials on my mobile device that I'm in control of, the ability to have income verification on my phone, one-click mortgage applications, to really pare down the amount of work it takes to not only apply but to process, the other side of the coin, to process these things. There's a huge opportunity to take advantage of these digital credentials that are beyond just is Paul Paul.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think we've all filled out too many web forms, haven't we? We're hopefully getting to the end of that fairly soon. Paul, that's been really fantastic. Thanks for running through all those really good insights as well. Kind of moving now into audience questions, just kind of running through these in the order that are in front of me, if I may. Paul is asking, another Paul, hopefully not you, is asking, as a global company, how are you viewing what different countries' jurisdictions are doing with verifiable credentials? And what would you ask of government policymakers and standards bodies to enhance adoption?
I would say that I'll answer this in a maybe different way than expected. And if there's a follow-on, I'd be happy to answer it. We are very deliberate when it comes to rolling out these capabilities globally, and every marketplace is or could be different. So we do a lot of experimentation to figure out what is the most appropriate for a given marketplace. So I'd say we're not going to take a one size fits all swing at this and just roll out globally. We're going to go region by region and experiment and find out where our experiments are actually adding value to the customer journey, adding value to Amazon, and where they're not, and pivoting appropriately. As a global company, how are you viewing what different countries are doing with VCs? But how we are viewing it is that we're net positive on it in the long run. Again, I'm not one to say that government-based is better than private sector-based. I think a private sector approach should be considered as well. But, since a lot of these IDs are bootstrapped from government entities to begin with, governments have a major role in VCs and other digital identity technologies and standards. But yeah, I think we're net positive, and like I said, we'll take a very pragmatic, experimental based approach in each region to make sure we get it right.
Yeah. And it certainly sounds like you're being influenced to some degree by what's happening, and it certainly sounds like you're monitoring what's happening in certain countries and markets that are important to you. But you're not just diving in head first all the time. You're just waiting to see how the market develops as well.
Right.
So no, I think that's clear. Steve is asking, could you see Amazon being an issuer into a wallet? So would you ever see yourself as being an organization that issues some form of credential, Paul?
I would say we're thinking about it. Right now we are a slam dunk relying party to digital identities. Whether we can, contribute back into the network is something that we need to explore. But I don't have a solid answer for you right now. I think there are opportunities for us to be an attribute provider in certain cases, and depending on the use case, we could be an issuer. But we really need to explore the again, back to our customers and to our business, what the benefit would be, what the impact would be, and is there viability to be an actual issuer in this space?
I'm really interested, if you were to be an issuer, What do you think you would issue? If you get any kind of thoughts in your head about what that would be, would that be some kind of Amazon like identity credential, or would you rather not say?
I don't know. I'd rather not say because I just don't know.
Okay.
I just don't know. I mean, like I said, we value pseudonymity. We have, but at the same time, we value. Obviously, I'm making an obvious statement. We are highly sensitive to account protection and account takeover, and even with pseudonymity, we are really, really good at protecting accounts from takeover. So there's probably more assurance in our account than something you would, another pseudonymous equivalent. But I'm not quite sure, what role we would play. Obviously, we have billions of users, so there's something to be said about that. But I just don't know. I just don't know. It's a great question, and I think something that we have to explore sooner than later.
Yeah. And feel free to tell me afterwards in private if you want, and I'll
You
put it
bet.
on LinkedIn. How many users do you actually have, Paul, at Amazon? That's an interesting question that I didn't really know the answer to. Are you aware of how many unique users that you have worldwide?
That I know, but I can't say.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Okay. It's more than a million, I bet, though.
A little bit more than a million.
Question from Jonathan. It's more of a kind of implementation question, I guess. But Jonathan's asking, do these digital identities, maybe means credentials, provide data updates to the organization accepting them? For example, my home address changes, can Amazon automatically be sent the change? So I guess it's some kind of credential refresh is the way that I'd imagine that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've got any comments. Normally you would see, I think, credentials be revoked and then be reissued with a new address, but I don't know if there's some kind of refreshing or updating feature that you're aware of.
Yeah, we're struggling with this one in another area of the business that we're working with, where if the attributes are truly out of the enterprise and onto the phone, how do you do stuff like refreshes? How do I run a batch process that needs PII as part of that? Am I going to query, 500 million phones at 2 a.m. To get this information? Right now, I don't think there's a capability to do. Don't quote me on this, but I don't think there's a capability to do, automatic refreshing. But at the same time, we also understand that certain attributes have a freshness or a time to live, if you will. So an example is if I ask you if you're older than 18 because you're trying to make an age-restricted product, and the answer comes back as no, well, I need to ask that again down the road because you might have turned 18 between two transactions. But if the answer comes back as yes, probably never need to ask that question again. So that's one of the ways we're looking at it.
Okay, good to know. Pierce has got a question. So Pierce is talking about GLIFE, which is the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation, which was set up in the wake of the financial crisis of 2007, 2008,
Yep.
To enable organizations to be identified, just kind of providing context for the audience that are not aware. And they have legal entity identifiers that they issue, mostly in the financial services space. And so the question from Pierce is, do you have an opinion about the need value of verifiable legal entity identifiers, VLEI, defined by GLIFE? Do you see a need for those within Amazon?
So I'll caveat my answer. So business identity is not an area that we have done a lot in. By we, I mean my group. Amazon writ large has done a lot. When you enroll as a seller, there is business verification that occurs. That is run by another group. So I can't really speak a whole lot about this other than my own personal opinion is that I think there is, from a business perspective, there is absolute need to have the same amount, if not more, rigor that we're putting towards people. And one of the things I like about what's going on in the EU is the potential for that wallet to store business related information and affiliation related information. So not only do you have the ability to do KYC, but you can also do KYB.
Very good. Thank you. I think the last question I at least have for now is from Carson. I think it's quite similar, regards organizational identities. They're often required for checks, etc., which have to be confirmed manually. Is Amazon considering using the advantages of digital organizational identity to automate processes? And I think from your last answer, the answer is yes if you're a reseller, but it's just not your specific focus. Paul, is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's the same answer. I'll pile on a little bit and say that, my group is leading the work around what's happening in the EU, and we are bringing these potential capabilities to our partners within the business so that they can take advantage of them. And there's a lot of cases at Amazon already where we've innovated around business identity and organizational identities so that it's not done manually. But again, it's kind of out of the scope of what my group does.
Perfect. It is a rare day or a rare episode, Paul, that we get through all of my questions and all of the audience questions. So you've clearly done a fantastic job of answering the questions succinctly.
or not a good one.
No, I'd say they were pretty good. But it was really well attended today as well. So lots of questions. So it was definitely a popular session.
Great.
So I think with that, we can draw it to a close. So this was why Amazon is doubling down on digital credentials, mDLs and EUDI. Paul Grassi, Principal Product Engineer at Amazon. Thank you very much for joining us. It really has been a pleasure. And yeah, really enjoyed the insights in the conversation, and I hope we speak again soon.
Thank you. I do too. Appreciate you having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Bye-bye.